I should have known the moment I pulled up to my aunt's estate that I didn't belong there. The driveway was lined with luxury cars that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years, and there I was in my beat-up Honda with a cracked windshield, wearing my father's old military jacket and his combat boots. The same boots I'd worn to his funeral 10 years ago. The same boots I wore when I needed to feel close to him. They were scuffed, worn down at the heels, and completely out of place at a family gathering that looked more like a fashion magazine photo shoot than a reunion. But these people were all I had left. My mom passed when I was 12, my dad when I was 19, and Aunt Corinne's family was the only connection to anything that felt like home anymore. So I swallowed my pride, grabbed the bottle of cheap wine I'd brought, and walked through those massive double doors into a world that made it clear I was an outsider. The moment my cousin Thessaly saw me, her face did this thing where her smile froze, then melted into something between pity and disgust. She was standing with a group of her friends, all of them dressed like they'd just stepped off a yacht, and when her eyes traveled from my face down to my boots, she actually laughed out loud. Not a polite chuckle, a full, mocking laugh that made everyone around her stop and look. "Oh my God," she said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Did you walk here through a war zone, or is this some kind of statement piece I'm not trendy enough to understand?" Her friends giggled, and I felt my face go hot. I tried to laugh it off, tried to play it cool, but my hands were already shaking. Aunt Corinne appeared out of nowhere, her perfectly manicured hand gripping my elbow as she pulled me toward the hallway. Her smile was still plastered on for the guests, but her voice was pure venom. "Retta, sweetheart, why couldn't you have dressed appropriately? Just once. You're embarrassing us." She looked down at my boots like they were covered in mud. "This is a distinguished gathering. People with status are here, and you show up looking like my father?" I finished for her, and something flickered in her eyes. Annoyance, maybe. Or shame. I couldn't tell anymore. She didn't answer, just patted my arm condescendingly and walked away, leaving me standing in that marble hallway feeling about 2 inches tall. I thought about leaving right then. I should have, but I'd driven an hour to get there, and some pathetic part of me still wanted to belong, still wanted to be part of something that felt like family. Dinner was worse. They'd seated me at the far end of this long, elegant table, practically in a different zip code from everyone else. I kept my head down, barely touched my food, and prayed the evening would end quickly. Then Thessaly stood up, wineglass in hand, and my stomach dropped. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Everyone went quiet, glasses raised. "To family, all kinds of family, even the ones who show up looking like they raided a thrift store dumpster." The room erupted in laughter, not uncomfortable chuckles, real, genuine laughter. At me. I felt tears burning behind my eyes as I pushed my chair back, the screech of it against the marble floor cutting through the noise. I just wanted to disappear. But Aunt Corinne wasn't done with me yet. I barely slept that night. Aunt Corinne's slap was still burning on my cheek, and Thessaly's laughter kept echoing in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. The words my aunt had hissed at me before I left played on repeat. "Your father died a nobody, and you're following right in his footsteps." I'd cried the entire drive home, mascara streaking down my face, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. So when my phone rang at 6 in the morning with an unknown number, I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Maybe it was the official-sounding ringtone, or maybe I was just too exhausted to care anymore. "Is this Retta Kane?" The voice was deep, authoritative, military, not the kind of voice that made small talk. "Yes," I managed, my own voice still hoarse from crying. "Your presence is required at the National Defense Complex today at 0800 hours. This concerns your father's service record. A car will be sent to your location at 0730. This is not optional." He hung up before I could ask questions. I sat there in my bed, staring at my phone, completely confused. My father had been a soldier, sure, but he'd been regular army. Nothing special. Nothing that would warrant a call from what sounded like a very high-ranking official 10 years after his death. Part of me wondered if it was some kind of mistake, or worse, a scam. But something in that man's voice told me it was real. When the black SUV pulled up to my apartment exactly at 7:30, I knew this wasn't a joke. The National Defense Complex looked like something out of a movie. Massive concrete walls, guard towers, gates that required 3 separate security checks just to get through. I felt completely out of place in my jeans and t-shirt, still wearing those same boots from the night before because, honestly, I'd put them on out of spite. If my family was going to mock me for honoring my father's memory, then I'd wear them everywhere. Inside, the building was even more intimidating. Armed guards everywhere, people in military uniforms with more medals than I could count. And then there was me, looking like I'd wandered in from a college campus. I got stares. A woman in an expensive suit waiting in the security line behind me actually scoffed and muttered something about tour groups to her colleague. I was directed to a scanner I'd never seen before, not the regular metal detector everyone else was walking through, but this sleek, sophisticated panel that looked like something from a science fiction film. The guard's expression was unreadable as he gestured to it. "Place your hand here, ma'am." I did, expecting nothing. Maybe a beep. Maybe a red light telling me I didn't belong here, which honestly would have matched the theme of my week. But what happened next made my heart stop. The scanner lit up, first red, then gold, and a computerized voice echoed through the entire security area, loud enough that everyone stopped what they were doing. "Access granted. Special Forces Omega level. Clearance inherited. Classified bloodline verified." The silence that followed was deafening. Every single person in that checkpoint turned to stare at me. The guard snapped to attention like someone had pulled a string. The woman who'd mocked me went completely pale, her mouth falling open. And an officer, a full-bird colonel based on his insignia, approached me and actually saluted. I stood there, frozen, my hand still on the scanner, my father's boots suddenly feeling heavier than they ever had before. What the hell was Omega level? What did classified bloodline mean? My father had never mentioned anything like this. He'd been just a dad who played catch with me in the backyard and made terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings. Or at least that's what I'd thought. "Ms. Kane," the colonel said, his voice respectful in a way that made my skin prickle. "If you'll follow me, Commander Tavish is waiting for you. It's time you learned the truth about your father." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my life shattered into a million pieces. The briefing room had been overwhelming. 3 hours of classified files, mission reports with entire paragraphs blacked out, and photos of my father in tactical gear I'd never seen him wear. Commander Tavish had explained everything with the kind of patience you'd use with someone whose entire world just got turned upside down. My father wasn't just a soldier. He was part of an elite unit so secret it didn't exist in any public record. Omega Force. The people who handled threats nobody else could. The ghosts who saved thousands of lives in operations the world would never know about. And those boots I'd been mocked for? They were issued only to operatives with the highest level of clearance. Every scuff, every worn patch represented missions my father had survived. Battles he'd fought to keep people like Thessaly safe enough to laugh at designer brunch parties. When Commander Tavish mentioned the gala that evening, something clicked in my brain. He said it casually, mentioning that several high-profile families had secured invitations through political connections, including my aunt's family. The same people who'd humiliated me less than 24 hours ago were going to be at the most exclusive military event of the year, rubbing elbows with people they thought would elevate their social status. "With your clearance," he'd said, "you're automatically a priority guest, a guest of honor, actually." I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't dress to impress. I wore a simple black dress I'd owned for years. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed wealth or status. But I polished those boots until they shined, and I draped my father's jacket over my shoulders like armor. When I walked into that gala, I wasn't trying to fit into their world anymore. I was honoring mine. The venue was breathtaking, crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, waiters carrying champagne that probably cost more per glass than my rent. And there, near the center of the room, were Thessaly and Aunt Corinne, dressed to the nines, laughing with some politician I vaguely recognized from the news. Thessaly saw me first. Her champagne glass literally stopped halfway to her lips, her eyes going wide. Then her expression twisted into something ugly, that same mocking sneer from the night before. "Oh my God," she said, loud enough to draw attention. "Security! The charity case crashed the gala. Someone please—" A guard did approach, but not the way she expected. He was professional, polite, walking directly to me while Thessaly stood there with her hand raised like she was flagging down a taxi. "Ms. Kane, may I verify your credentials for entry?" I didn't say anything, just placed my hand on the security tablet he was holding, the same kind of scanner from that morning. And I watched Thessaly's face as the computerized voice rang out, crystal clear, echoing through the massive hall. "Access granted, Special Forces Omega level, priority guest, full facility clearance." The music didn't just fade, it stopped. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Every head in that ballroom turned toward the entrance, toward me, standing there in my simple dress and my father's boots, while that announcement hung in the air like thunder. Thessaly's face went from smug to confused to absolutely pale in about 3 seconds. Aunt Corinne's mouth fell open, her champagne glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the marble floor. The politician they'd been sucking up to took a step back, suddenly very interested in his phone. Commander Tavish appeared through the crowd, his dress uniform immaculate, medals gleaming. He approached me with a nod of respect that made several people around us straighten their postures. "Ms. Kane," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "We've been expecting you. Your father's legacy is being honored here tonight, and we're grateful to have you with us." I couldn't help it. I looked directly at Thessaly, at her frozen expression of horror and disbelief, and I smiled. Not a mean smile, just the smile of someone who finally knew exactly who she was. Thessaly tried to recover. "I'll give her that." She plastered on this desperate smile and reached for my arm like we were old friends, like she hadn't publicly humiliated me in front of our entire family just yesterday. Her hand was shaking when she grabbed me. "Retta, sweetie, this is incredible. We had no idea about your father's service. If we'd known—" I removed her hand from my arm. Gently, calmly, the way you'd brush off a piece of lint. "You didn't ask," I said, my voice steady in a way it hadn't been the night before. "You assumed? You mocked? You laughed at these boots like they were garbage." I looked down at them, these scuffed, worn boots that had carried my father through operations that saved countless lives. He earned every single mark on them. Every scuff represents someone he saved, someone's mother, someone's child, someone who got to go home because my father didn't. Aunt Corinne pushed through the crowd that had formed around us. Her face was doing this thing where she was trying to look apologetic, but mostly just looked terrified. She knew what this meant. She'd slapped the daughter of a classified military hero in front of witnesses. She'd called him a nobody. "Retta, darling, please, we didn't understand. If we'd known about his clearance level, his position—" "That's the problem," I interrupted, and my voice cracked just a little. "You only care now because of a security clearance, because of a title, because it gives you something to brag about at your country club." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but these weren't tears of shame anymore. They were anger and grief, and 10 years of carrying my father's memory alone. He was a hero before you knew his rank. He was a hero when he came home exhausted and still made me breakfast. He was a hero in these boots, whether they were scuffed or shined. The crowd around us was completely silent. I could see phones out, people recording, and somewhere in the back of my mind I knew this would be everywhere by morning. But I didn't care anymore. "You said he'd be ashamed of me." My voice was barely a whisper now, but in that silent ballroom, everyone heard it. "You slapped me for honoring his memory, but I think he'd be ashamed of you." Security was already moving toward Thessaly and Aunt Corinne, not aggressively, but firmly, the kind of escort that makes it clear you're not welcome. Thessaly was crying now, mascara running, stammering something about a misunderstanding. Aunt Corinne tried to maintain her dignity, but her hands were shaking as she gathered her purse. The politician they'd been schmoozing had already disappeared into the crowd. As they were led toward the exit, Thessaly looked back at me one last time, not with anger, with something worse. Regret. The kind that comes too late to matter. Commander Tavish touched my elbow gently. "There's something we'd like to show you," he said quietly. "If you're ready." He led me through the gala, past the staring faces and whispered conversations, to a quieter wing of the complex. The Memorial Hall. Walls lined with names etched in black granite, each one representing an operative who'd died in the line of duty. Classified heroes whose families often never knew the full truth of their sacrifice. And there, on the far wall, freshly unveiled, was my father's name, Jackson Kane. Below it, his rank, his unit designation, and a single line, "Who gave everything so others could have tomorrow." I broke down. Right there in my polished boots and simple dress, I crumpled. Commander Tavish caught me, and for a moment, this stern military man just let me cry on his shoulder while other officers stood respectfully back, giving me space to grieve and heal and finally understand. My father had kept his life secret to protect me. Every mission, every scar, every night he came home exhausted but smiling. It was all for me, to give me a normal life, to keep me safe from a world of shadows and sacrifice. And I'd honored him the only way I knew how, by wearing his boots, by carrying his memory, by refusing to be ashamed of where I came from.